Good afternoon, everyone. By my clock, it is 1 p.m. Central Time, 2 p.m. Eastern, and we will be very mindful of everyone's time and get started. So, a few housekeeping rules before I pass it off to Randa. Feel free to drop any questions that you have in the chat, and we will address them as we go along. If you have any technical difficulties or anything, please reach out to me, Marlia Finch, and I'm happy to help address those as you navigate the Teams platform. And without further ado, I will pass it off to Randa.
Thank you, Marlia. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm glad to see we have several of y'all in attendance. Today, we're going to be talking about seamless summer option rural non-congregate feeding. Just a little bit of a precursor to this is that we did non-congregate feeding during COVID. We learned a lot, and this is somewhat similar, but it's also a brand new thing that we're working with. So if you have questions, we'll do our best to answer them. And if we don't have an answer yet, we will do our best to figure it out for you. So as you know, this is the department's strategic plan, and we fall into student readiness. Tennessee Public Schools will be equipped to serve the academic and non-academic needs of all students in their career pathways. As we know that nutrition is a non-academic need, and we cannot feed a hungry child. So that is where we fall into that. Our objectives today are to establish requirements for rural non-congregate meals for summer 2023. And the way we're going to do that with our agenda is we're going to talk about general SSO requirements. I'm not going to spend a ton of time there since we have had a general SSO training, but it will be in the PowerPoint as a reference if you need it. We're going to talk about the rural non-congregate requirements, and we're going to talk about the SSO and rural non-congregate application process. All right, so let's start with the general SSO requirements. So as you know, we as a state agency are responsible for recruiting and overseeing the sponsors, which are y'all. We process claims and distribute reimbursements, and we monitor sites. You as a sponsor recruit sites and provide training and technical assistance. You provide monitoring, report meal counts to us, and you conduct the outreach to families in the community. The sites is where food is eaten, or in this case, distributed. So the kids are fed and supervised, or the food is distributed. The sites keep accurate counts of the number of kids who are served a meal, maintain a safe environment, and then conduct outreach to draw kids to their sites. So for a general overview, SSO is a streamlined option for providing summer meals by continuing to follow several of the same operational requirements that are present in the National School Lunch and School Breakfast programs, such as the meal patterns and procedures for filing claims and determining student eligibility. So what are the similarities between SSO and NSLP? Well, we follow the same meal patterns as National School Lunch Program and School Breakfast Program. You must meet the vegetable subgroup requirements and must meet the minimum serving amounts for all requirements. You must keep accurate production records, maintain calorie, sodium, and fat limitations, create and follow HACCP plans. Only meals served to children can be claimed for reimbursement, must keep accurate meal counts, and typically, meals must be consumed on site, but we know that with the option of rural non-congregate, if you're approved for that, then food can be taken off-site. So area eligibility, sites must be located in an area in which poor economic conditions exist, and this can be established using school data. So the site is located in an attendance area of a school where at least 50% of enrolled students are eligible for free or reduced meals. And then census data, the site is located in a census block determined to have at least 50% of children eligible for free or reduced price meals. And for census data, that applies to the address site only. Here's some info on using census data. We are not going to do a deep dive into that, but I will be showing that map in a little bit because it also now has rural data that the USDA is using. So for site types and reimbursement, we have open or restricted open, closed enrolled, camp, and migrant. All of our sites are either going to be open or closed enrolled. An open site must serve meals on a first come, first served basis to any student or child that shows up to that area, and then closed enrolled sites only feed a select group of children enrolled in a specific program. On-site monitoring must be conducted once within operation at all sites, and at a minimum, meal counting, claiming, menu planning, and food safety requirements must be reviewed. And the on-site monitoring form is linked in this presentation. Okay, we're going to quickly talk about the meal pattern, which is the same, as we said, as the school lunch and school breakfast meal pattern. So for school breakfast meal pattern, we know that we have fluid milk, fruit, or juice. Juice cannot exceed half of the total. Vegetables, which credit as fruit, grains, and then meats, which credit as grains. And we have requirements for grades K5, 6-8, and 9-12. For breakfast, you can serve one meal pattern for all age grade groups. Here is our dietary specifications for the breakfast meal pattern. Again, you can work to do one meal pattern for K-12 because there is an overlap in all three age grade groups. Okay, so for the school lunch meal pattern, we have milk, fruits, vegetables, grains, and meat alternates. Each age grade group has daily and weekly minimums that must be met, and they're displayed on the screen. Again, I'm not going to go super in depth on those because we've talked about those previously, and if you have questions, we're happy to help you out with those. Here are our vegetable subgroup requirements. There are no daily vegetable subgroup requirements, but each age grade group does have weekly requirements that must be met across a menu for the week. And then for the dietary specifications, there is an overlap between grades K5 and 6-8, but 9-12 is different. And the age grade group, we'll talk about this a little bit more in depth later, but the age grade group that you follow if you're doing an open site is the age grade group that you are anticipating seeing the most kids of. Okay, so let's get into the non-congregate meal service, which is available for rural areas, since that is the meat of today's presentation. Take a sip of water first. Okay, so non-congregate meals. For non-congregate meal service, USDA provided guidance in SP 05-2023, which was implementation guidance for summer 2023 non-congregate meal service in rural areas. Since I made this presentation and it was approved, we've actually received an additional policy memo, which I'm pretty sure is SP 07-2023, which includes additional questions and answers. You'll notice that for this summer, all of this guidance is in reference to summer 2023. That is because the guidance we are working on right now is interim guidance, and the final rule will not be available until next year. So what we are dealing with this summer may change for next summer. So that's why all of the things that you'll hear for rural non-congregate feeding this year will all be specific to summer 2023, because we don't know yet what summer 2024 will look like. We do know that rural non-congregate feeding is permanent by legislation. So the ability to continue providing non-congregate meals in rural areas will still be there. We just don't know how or what that's going to look like yet. So I just want to throw that out there. So non-congregate meals may only be served in an area that meets guidelines for rural designation, which we're going to talk about. Must be located in an area that does not have congregate meal service, must be located at a location that meets area eligibility requirements, and is not intended to replace congregate meal service. So something that we haven't officially defined in this presentation is, what does congregate meal service mean? And our usual requirements say that you have to stay, the kid has to stay on site and consume that meal and can only take one item away from the meal. So this allows the entire meal to be taken off site. It also allows for multiple days of distribution, which we'll talk about a little bit more. So USDA has provided us a definition of rural, which says that it's any area in a county which is not part of a metropolitan statistical area, or any pocket within the area that the state agency with FNS, so USDA concurrence, is determined to be geographically isolated from urban areas. So Marlia has dropped a link in the chat, which is the USDA, let's not do that yet, which is the USDA Summer Food Service Program, SFSP Rural Designation Map. So this is the initial baseline for what constitutes rural. And we're going to talk about the process in a few more slides, but I do want to say that if you are classified as rural, that only makes you eligible to participate. You must still submit an application and get approved by the state agency. And that is in addition to your usual TMAC application. We're going to talk about that in a little bit more depth in a minute. So I am going to search for, I'm going to use Macon County as an example. Because I know that they have all three types, we'll use all three types of data here. So Macon County is showing up as purple, which on this map is considered not rural. So it tells you that the metro area that it's associated with is the Nashville area. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. So you can see that right beside Macon County is Clay County, and it is not shaded purple. So Clay County on this map would be considered rural. All right, so let's go back to Macon County, and Marlia will put these additional links in the chat as we go. So you say to me, what? But Macon County, that is rural. So I'll say, okay, well, let's check out the other data sources we have. So next, we're going to look at what are called, okay, well, No Kid Hungry has apparently updated their map in the last couple of days. So let's get to it. All right, sorry, y'all. Oh, not what we want. All right, let's search for Macon County, Tennessee here. Okay, they've apparently just changed the website layout. The map is still the same. So you can see there's a lot of colors going on here on this map. So what I'm going to do is try to turn off the layers of the map. Pretty sure that they just changed their map. Oh, this is fun. So normally I would turn off the layers for area eligibility, which is this orange and blue coloring in the background, which kind of makes everything harder to see when it comes to the rural designation. Okay, so here you can see this is the legend of the map. And anything that's shaded this yellow color is considered not rural. And then anything that has these two additional green colors could potentially be rural. So within Macon County, we've already established that the USDA map says that it's not rural. And then it's kind of hard to see because of the orange and blue, but this is a census block that the USDA status is not rural, but according to the RUCA code, it says code 10, which is considered by USDA, by that data source, to be rural. So what is happening is you have these three areas within Macon County that would be eligible for rural based on this map and this data. So now we say, well, what about this area over here? Well, in this case, we go to a third data source, which is the locale lookup map. And the reason why USDA has given us permission to use both of these data sources, and they say they will approve them in an expedited manner. It appears to depend on the day as to what USDA determines to be an expedited manner. We submitted some in the beginning and they were approved on the same day. I've submitted some additional ones that we haven't heard back in several days regarding. So not really sure what the true meaning of expedited manner is at this moment. So if at all possible, it's best to use this data first, the RUCA data, because it looks at things at a census block level. So it gives you more flexibility than using this other map, which is very address specific. So again, I'm going to go to Macon County. And you can see this is their county, and this area is included in the RUCA codes, and this is the area that wasn't. And since it's green on this map, addresses over here would also be eligible for rural designation. However, both this map and the No Kid Hungry with the RUCA codes does require that concurrence or approval by USDA. So what this means is, let's start back over here with the initial SFSP map. If you are not shaded purple, you are automatically eligible as rural and can proceed with submitting your application to us if you want to operate non-congregate. If you are shaded purple, then you have these two additional data sources to look through to see if there is an area within your county where you could provide rural non-congregate meals. I know that's a lot of kind of levels and layers to this data and the eligibility as to whether or not you can even be considered rural. If you are in a purple county, so not rural by this USDA data and you're interested in doing non-congregate and we haven't already talked and you're not really sure how or if you can qualify, definitely reach out to me and or your regional consultant, and we're happy to help you look through these maps and see what's eligible and available. Okay, so that's rural. What is rural? Now let's go on with saying, okay, you've met the definition of rural either by the SFSP map, the RUCA/No Kid Hungry map, or the locale lookup map. So let's talk about what you're going to do then. These are the rural pockets. That's essentially what I talked about with the RUCA and the locale lookup maps. So you have multiple options of service models if you would like to participate in rural non-congregate. You can do parent pickup. You can do it in combination with congregate feeding. And you can distribute meal packs to children. Now, I know you're going to say, wait, you just said that rural non-congregate has to be in a place where there's not congregate feeding, but you're also saying it can be in combination with congregate feeding. I know, but that's what USDA said that we could do. And so in this instance, what that means is that, let's say you have, there's three scenarios that I can think of right off, okay? So the first one would be you have kids enrolled in some type of a program that's happening Monday through Friday, but you want to send them weekend meals. Well, you could do a non-congregate site to serve their Saturday and Sunday meals on Friday, or a lot of our summer programs only last until Thursday. So maybe on Thursday, you're handing them 3 additional meals for the weekend. Another scenario of this could be that you have a program where kids are coming every day for lunch, but you don't have time, or they're not there for breakfast. So you could serve them lunch and then send them a non-congregate breakfast to count for that next day. And then another option where this could work is that you have a closed enrolled site or some type of site where you know the kids who are going to be there, and other kids in the community can't get those meals, so you would like to do non-congregate for the rest of the community. There's a question: if we are considered rural and have already submitted our SSO application on TMAC, is there anything else required? Yes. Anyone who wants to do non-congregate feeding must submit an application and get approved by us at the state agency in addition to your TMAC application, which we're going to talk about in a little bit more depth. We're going to talk about the application in more depth because USDA has, they have a lot of additional reporting requirements that are necessary for rural non-congregate, and we don't have any other way to capture that data. So you do have to do an additional application. I see another question that says, we received a title grant for rural schools, but we are in purple. I am confused. Yes, it is very confusing as to what their what data they use and how that works. Just because you're purple on the map doesn't mean that all hope is lost, and it probably just means that there was a different type of data used for that title grant. That's something that we have learned through this process, is it doesn't seem like there's a true uniform definition of rural. So I'm going to go back to the presentation and then I'll come back to questions. So what are the requirements? Food safety standards must be maintained. You can provide up to 7 days of meals at one time. This is different than what the policy guidance says. As a state, we have decided to limit it to 7 for the sake of food safety. The non-congregate site must still establish meal service times. So those meal service times will be outside of what you might typically be allowed for each of those meal times, but you still have to establish meal service times, which means you have to tell us when those meals will be available and when you're providing meals. And then also offer versus serve may be implemented with non-congregate meals. And offer versus serve is always an optional with the seamless summer option, even for 9th through 12th grade. So for meal counting, meal counts must be taken at the point of service. Meals must contain all the required components or items, and only one reimbursable meal can be served per child per meal service. So for non-congregate feeding, multiple meals may be served at once, but the 1 meal per child per service must be maintained through your program integrity plan, which is part of the application that you submit to us. Okay, for non-congregate meal counting, we created a form to assist with this. So it's essentially the provisional feeding tally sheet that has additional fields to help better accommodate non-congregate feeding models. So we've added some fields which say what are the number of meals that are being distributed. So you'll write down the number of meals that are being given to each child, what days you intend for them to be consumed on, and then the total of meals that you're serving. So let me share this on my screen. Okay, so you can see here's essentially an instruction sheet, and then we have a sample. So this is from ABC School District. The site name is Blue Skies Park, and we have Mary Manager who is over this site. We're serving meals on June 1st, and we're serving 7 meals. So our intended consumption date for this lunch is June 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th. So what happens is when every child comes through, we're doing 1 mark, and 1 mark is equivalent to these 7 meals that are served. So then we scroll down to the bottom. Well, wait, first let's see. We have 34 tally marks. Nope, I don't want to move that. Nope, nope, nope. I didn't want to do any of that. Okay. We have 34 tally marks. So we come down here to the total number of tallies, 34, times the number of consumption days, 7, which provides us 238 meals that were served. So the intent of this is to help you not have to make 7 slashes for every student that comes through, or just to like write it in the margins or something like that. We wanted to provide you a resource where you could clearly demonstrate the number of meals that are being served at each meal service. If you are approved for rural non-congregate feeding, this meal count sheet is sent to you with your approval email, and we can also send it out as part of the follow-up to this training. Okay, there's our sample again. Oh, and then on the actual form, I guess I should show, there's the sample, and then the next page is essentially the same sheet, but all the information is blank for you to complete. Okay, so if we can serve 1 meal type per child, or each child can get 1 meal per day of the specific type, what are the meals that we can serve in combination with each other? We can serve breakfast and lunch, breakfast and snack, breakfast and supper, lunch and snack, snack and supper. The 2 that cannot be combined together are lunch and supper, because those are essentially the same meals. They just have different timings in your application. Same meal pattern, same reimbursement, So we cannot serve both lunch and supper to a child on the same day. Okay, so for completing your production records, if you are operating non-congregate, you will complete a separate production record for each individual meal that is provided. For example, if you're distributing 3 lunches and 3 breakfasts at one time, you would complete 6 total production records. So you'd have breakfast day 1, lunch day 1, breakfast day 2, lunch day 2, breakfast 3, lunch day 3. And this will help you to determine that all your daily minimum serving sizes are met for each meal, because even though you may be serving multiple meals at a time, the daily requirements still must be met each day. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about, okay, if you're eligible for rural, what does that look like? How do you actually do rural non-congregate feeding? So if you would like to do rural non-congregate feeding, you will submit to us, to me, a application to operate 2023 Seamless Summer Option Rural Non-Congregate Meals, which looks like this. Okay, so within this form, you're saying your name, that you are requesting to operate rural non-congregate meals, and then you're going to tell us the site name and address, what district or county you're in, what service model you'll be using, so whether you're just doing strictly non-congregate feeding or you're doing it in combination with congregate feeding, and then this will be completed when your application is returned to you. If you are applying to operate more than these 6 sites, you can add those in an Excel sheet or send a Word document or something like that that has that information. Okay, so I mentioned that you would have to tell us your program integrity plan. So the first question is, describe the process in place to ensure integrity of the program when utilizing non-congregate meal service. So one of the big things that we're looking for here is, how are you communicating with families and parents to make sure that they aren't going to multiple sites and getting non-congregate meals in multiple places, or that just so that you're maintaining the 1 meal per child per day requirement. Again, how will you ensure that a child does not receive more than the maximum number of allowable meals? Very similar to your program integrity plan, but focusing on that piece. And then if you are implementing a parent pickup model, how do you plan to ensure that a parent or guardian is only picking up 1 meal per child? So if a parent guardian comes to you and says, I have 3 kids at home, how will you know that they actually do have 3 kids at home and they're not getting the food for themselves and their child? Okay, so then also, if you're approved to operate non-congregate meal service in rural areas, you will be required to keep separate meal counts and report those monthly. What process will you have in place to separate the meal counts for non-congregate? All of these questions on this application are a result of requirements that USDA is making us report. Since we created this application, we have determined that anyone operating rural non-congregate will need to do site-based claiming. That will prevent you from having to do an additional, additional reporting via survey or something like that to us. Most of the applications we have received so far are already participating in site-based claiming. And if you're not and you apply, we will handle that once your application is approved. Okay, so you submit the application to us. I'll say, okay, we've received your application. and then you will wait to hear whether or not you've been approved. If you are in one of those areas that was shaded purple and have to get, we have to get that USDA concurrence, your application approval will probably take longer. And as soon as we hear from USDA, if you're in that case, we'll let you know. So once you have your approval, you submit your TMAC application for non-congregate sites, which your regional consultant will approve, and then you will operate your non-congregate feeding after those are approved. Okay, so I'm gonna look at some questions and see if we have any we can answer at this moment. So someone asked, does the meal count form have to be specifically the non-congregate form? They use the same tally mark numbered sheet with the same information. It does not have the non-congregate title. You do not necessarily have to use this one for us that has the non-congregate title. However, you'll want to make sure that you are putting that your site is non-congregate. And if you are distributing multiple days of meals at a time, I would highly, highly encourage you to use this non-congregate specific one for the sake of, I think it makes your meal counting more streamlined and more clear, but it is not an absolute requirement to use the one that we have created for non-congregate. Okay, so again, I have said that USDA is requesting us to do a lot of additional data reporting for non-congregate. One of the things they are asking us to report is how many specific sites do we have that are non-congregate, and then how many are the type of feeding that's happening at those. So in order to keep this clear, we are asking that if you're doing non-congregate feeding, to create a new site in TMAC. And we want that site number to be NC, to stand for non-congregate, and then to have your site name be whatever your site name would be. This is a little different from guidance we've provided in the past, because we've always said, no, we don't want multiple sites at the same address. But in this instance, if you are doing a combination program where you're doing some congregate feeding and some non-congregate feeding, we are going to have you do multiple site applications and have the non-congregate feeding specifically be reflected on your site application. And then this information is the same as what you would do in regular congregate feeding. The next slide explains these. Your Seamless Summer Option Program contact, it may be at the SFA or organizational level, and the organizational liaison would be the person at the site level if they are not your SFA. If they're not associated with your SFA, it might be like the, if you're at a library, then like the librarian who's in charge of marking meals or something like that. Not everyone utilizes staff at other locations, and that is just depends on how your operation is set up. Okay, so for the period of operation, we're gonna say no for year-round schools. I don't think we have any year-round schools. And then for your operation days each month, you'll enter the number of days the site will operate each month, and this number must be equal to or greater than the number entered in your claim in TMAC. So I want to go back here. For non-congregate, you are only going to put in this area the number of days where you are distributing meals, because that is the days that your site will operate. You will keep on your production records and other places the days of essentially days of meals to be consumed. But in TMAC, we want to see the days that you're actually distributing meals, because this information is sent to USDA, and it is sent to No Kid Hungry, and it is available as public resources for people to find meals that are available. Something else that was requested, I didn't mean to click there. Something additional that was requested after we created this presentation is that USDA is also requesting that if you're operating non-congregate feeding, for address line 2 to say non-congregate feeding. So that will be on the address line and also in the site number to designate that a site is a non-congregate site. Your eligibility, this is not affected by non-congregate. In order to operate a non-congregate site, as we said, you have to be area eligible, just like you would for a regular congregate feeding site. You'll answer those questions accordingly. For the age grade group in meal participation, this question on your application goes back to those operating days. So if you are distributing meals every Tuesday and let's say every Tuesday and Friday, you would only put Tuesday and Friday for breakfast, Tuesday and Friday for lunch, even though you may be serving 3 and 4 meals at a time. If you're serving lunch every day and breakfast every day, but that breakfast is a non-congregate breakfast, then you would still put that you're doing the breakfast every day, and you would put that specific time when you will be distributing the breakfast. So the way you complete this really depends on your plan of operation for how you're implementing non-congregate. There is not one direct way as to how that will be done. Again, for closed sites, this is just our general closed enrolled information. I'm going to go through these a little quickly because I want to make sure we have time for more questions. So again, you're going to enter the days and times. You will select only the days that meals will be distributed and the meal service is available. Again, you have to keep that internal documentation to reflect the number of meals that are distributed at each non-congregate meal service. Offer versus serve is always optional, and it is allowable for non-congregate feeding. Excessive heat days, we're just going to say no. This was a demonstration from USDA, and I don't think they're doing that this year. And then open sites must be open and restricted open, and migrant sites must be advertised to the public and must include the non-discrimination statement. Okay, I'm going to leave up my contact information for a second, and then we will go to the QR code. I know there were a couple of questions, and I want to allow for any more to come through that we might need. I saw that Lisa asked what are the numbers that are required, and Lisa, I'm not sure if you were referring to the RUCA numbers, but it is linked on that No Kid Hungry map. I think it's codes 4 through 10 that they allow. There's a question about if you choose closed but only want to feed the Boys and Girls Club, can you do that? That is a little bit tricky. It would kind of depend on how that Boys and Girls Club is set up, because you would need a specific enrollment list of that Boys and Girls Club. And if they just have a random kid that shows up to the Boys and Girls Club, but they're not on your enrollment list, then that would not be a reimbursable meal. So that one we might need to talk about a little bit more offline to get your specific scenario. Is a desktop on-site monitoring form allowable? No. The public health emergency, I think, ended 5 days ago, and that was when the desktop monitoring abilities ended. And when will the recording be available is an excellent question that I do not at this moment have the answer to. I think that catches us up on questions. I will go over to the survey link, and Marlea is also going to put one in the chat. And since this doesn't really work with your phones to get your certificate, I'm going to go back to my contact information if y'all want to copy that down, and I will hang out and see if we have any additional questions that happen to come through. When are summer applications due? That is an excellent question. We encourage you to have those submitted at least 2 weeks before you plan to operate. You can always edit or add as the summer goes on. There is not a hard and fast deadline for non-congregate either. But if you are in one of those counties that is not rural, the absolutely sooner you can get that in, the better. The main requirement is that your application is approved prior to you starting your actual meal service. And as we wait to see if there's any more questions, I do just want to say thank you all for being here today. Thank you for always feeding the kids, no matter what the circumstances that you might face in order to do so. We really appreciate it. I would love to come out and visit your summer program this summer. So if you would like some visits, let me know, and I would be happy to come see your program, whether that is congregate or non-congregate. And if you have additional questions after this training, you can always feel free to reach out to me and or your regional consultant. I know this is a lot of QR code backup. Yep, I can do that. The link is also in the chat if you would like it. I know there's a lot of moving parts and pieces to this, and so I appreciate all of your patience as we figure it out. Like I said before, we learned how to do some of this during COVID, but we were working under a lot of waivers, and there weren't as many stipulations to implement this. So it's kind of the same, but it's also brand new. So I appreciate all of your patience as we work through that. No Kid, Marissa wants everyone to know that the No Kid Hungry Rural Non-congregate Grant application deadline is next Friday, May 26th. Where can we access the USDA application that you showed? Do you mean the USDA map? I'm not really sure what you mean by USDA application. And then the PowerPoint will be shared very shortly as a follow-up email is the plan. Oh, so the non-congregate application was sent out in the weekly update. It will be part of this follow-up email. And if you still need a copy and can't find it in any of those places, you can reach out to me or your regional consultant and we can send it to you. You are welcome. Right. I'll hang out and see if we have any final questions come through, but if not, thank you all so much for participating today, and I look forward to talking to y'all soon.